Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CG Cup Mentorship with Even Amundsen. Today, we're talking about his process on a recent piece called the Oxalot. Did I say it right, Evan?
Yeah, more or less. I'm still working on what the pronunciation is going to be.
I mean, you're the creator, so you should know. I mean, according to Lovecraft, Cthulhu's name was Cthulhu or something. So,
oh yeah. Well, yeah. It's a mix between. I mean, it's a pretty inartful mix between two words. It's just ox and zealot, and I didn't want it to be like ocelot, because then that's the wrong
that's a cat.
So I was thinking like oxalot, but
oxalot, okay.
Yeah, or something. We'll figure that out.
Cool. All right, let's dive right into it. Right? Let's see what you did.
So the character in Final is quite interesting. It's the idea of a kind of the archetype of a berserker, but set with an entirely different cultural backdrop. So the idea was to kind of use Celtiberians as our archetype, and then really feed into the berserker kind of idea. But instead of a bear or instead of a bear shirt, it's a cowhide, and kind of going with this motif of religious corruption and over kind of indulgence in slaughter, essentially, as a central motif. So I wanted the gruesomeness of like wearing a raw cowhide to be front and center. So this is, I mean, failed to mention it before. This guy is definitely supposed to be a bad guy, and so much so that like once you start seeing his counterparts within that same culture, you'll kind of see how extreme this religion is. So as you can see in the sketching, spending some time like figuring out poses in the beginning, it was kind of difficult to figure out exactly what the mood of this guy was going to be, because I wanted him to be epic and I wanted him to be kind of have an attitude, right? But it was hard to figure out if that attitude was going to be kind of brooding and paladin-esque or something. And at some point I just went like, no, you know what? Splayed legs and psychotic 1,000-yard stare, that's what we're going for. That's an easy read. So that was kind of the first step. As you can see, we make some little ideas there. So bovine studies and beefy boys. That was kind of the words we went for.
You should be wearing a bowler or something. Just go full Clockwork Orange.
That'd be fun. A little bit of madness goes a long way. But as you can see, I'm also making kind of continuous efforts throughout the Patreon process that we've been doing, and kind of improving my own process. So I'm trying to stay away from overly cleaning up things too early. I'm trying to make sure that I figure out all of my construction sort of process-wise, so that by the time I start cleaning things up, I don't actually have to fetishize that. I can just kind of focus on making things clear rather than being overly concerned about cleanliness when it comes to line art.
I wondered, for example, what did you base the weapons on?
So the weapon is it's a bit of a psychotic thing. It's essentially if you've ever seen the slaughter of a cow, usually what they do now is like a piston gun that knocks him out, kills him. In the olden days, they would either use like a big old mallet and just like brain damage, or a spike. And I figured that's a pretty nice weapon for a semi-psychotic like cow berserker, is to have the weapon with which they kill the cow. And also, I mean, if you have to admit, like a giant ass war pike or pick, I guess, would be pretty effective against like shields and as a weapon of terror. Things are about to get real bleak in the study department here, by the way, but it's a pretty bleak weapon, and it would not be hyper effective as like a dueling weapon. You wouldn't really face this up against like anything advantageously, but if you have a couple of dudes running around the battlefield swinging the shit out of these things, I think people would be concerned, and that's kind of the point.
That reminds me pretty much on these. I don't know what the word in English is, but in German we call it Rabenschnabel. It's basically like a hammer.
Rabenschnabel.
Yeah,
that makes me strangely happy.
It just means like beak of the raven, which is basically like a hammer with a spike, which was used to smash helmets and all that stuff. You know?
Yeah, that's essentially that's the essential idea there. Yeah. I'm just pausing it so that we don't run through all the studies, because they're kind of worth a little bit of a talk to. But Yeah, essentially, it's a fun name. It's was called Corvus by the Romans. But yeah, it's essentially that, right? And it's so vicious and basic. It's just like think about like a big nail that you just like hammer into people. So yeah, that was the basic kind of idea there, and also it becomes kind of a variant on your standard berserkers kind of axe, right? It doesn't really fit with these guys, so something that's more specialized to like their context and their lifestyle choices.
If we just go on with the video, just studies on these bulls, or oxens, is that
pretty much the same.
Yeah, so I mean that just means that you really have to also like the character that you created is basically not just a character; it's also additionally an animal added to the entire thing. So the studies that you have to do for animals, which we know you do a lot, you implement animals a lot in your work. How much time did you spend? Like if you put it into like a pie chart, how big is the part of studying animals overall?
It depends a lot on the project, of course. For this one, for example, I think we
had in general, since you started drawing, let's say it like this, it's totally bland, like
all in all, I don't know, 10% of the time maybe. Animals usually. Yeah, I mean, as part of like the study, because there's a ton of stuff to study, and like my knowledge of animal anatomy, for example, comes mostly out of my knowledge of human anatomy, and then just like adapting. And in later years and in sort of later months, really, I've gotten kind of more into it. I did, for example, I realized the connection, not so self-sufficiently, between human anatomy and different kinds of animal anatomy, for example. So the fact that you can kind of break down most animals' anatomy or an understanding of that to a human in a weird pose is really quite fun, right? Like with cats, for example, the fact that they have shoulders sitting like in the front here, it's weird when you realize it, but it makes total sense. And the same with horses, right? Their shoulders are sitting in the front over the chest. Birds are the entire opposite, where they have like the shoulders like on their backs and they're kind of sitting like this all the time. So if you can kind of wrap your head around how the general anatomy of an animal works, you can start playing with it, and you can start kind of toying around with it and using them. And I think the idea behind most of the kind of my studies is to get to a point where I can apply my knowledge without thinking too much about kind of getting things perfect. I just really need them to be believable. And that's kind of a central tenet in most of the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
But so bringing it back to this sketch, right? The really important thing that I knew was going to be important was that the cow's head needed to read immedately, because if people had to kind of reason out what they were looking at, that would ruin the read. So they need to be like on. And so there are tons of like little volumes and tons of little shapes in an animal's head that will kind of determine immediacy of read. And I was noticing, like in the beginning, my cow looked a lot like a horse, and I was like, oh, this could go badly. So I had to do a bit of a breakdown of those studies and like really kind of focus on what those recognizable volumes were gonna be.
So you made these characters as a part of your story of time, if I'm correct. And you mentioned that these are the bad guys. Is the kind of slaughter of animals and like adding them to their culture and religion one of the reasons why you combined all these things? Is this something that other cultures in the story don't do?
No, I mean, it's not like we have like vegans fighting carnivores here. I think, but it's more about the essential use and kind of appreciation of the animals that are in your care versus what I would argue is like an over or an abuse of those animals. And so, like personally, I mean, the whole idea of animal husbandry is a difficult problem to kind of argue about because people have different feelings about it. And so this is just like a reflection of how I feel about it, where I don't really have a problem with animal husbandry. Most animals are probably, like most animals, when they are treated well by humans, are probably better off in that situation than they are in the wild. Like a cow in the wild doesn't live that long and usually dies pretty horribly. So my idea with these guys is more the fact that lack of moral forethought is the issue here. They give themselves the liberty to do mass slaughter as a religious rite because it's either cultural or religious, but it's the reasons and the excuses people give themselves to kind of abstain from moral thought by religious or political or social dogma, and that's a nice little definition of evil. At least I think so.
Yeah. I mean, since you base all your characters and stories on your studies of history, right? Because you read a lot and you're kind of a nerd when it comes to these things. What inspired you to do this guy?
So that's a very good question, and it's got a pretty silly story behind it. So I play some games, and one of them that I play a lot is Rome 2 Total War. And so this guy, this culture that I kind of invented for them, came out of like a really nice session of playing Rome 2 Total War. And one thing that really kind of goes against history sometimes, which is really fun, is when like one random little kind of faction starts taking over half the world, right? And so I started coming up with a story of how this like tiny little people, like they're a tiny little clan in like the north of Spain, south of France. And suddenly they were like conquering half of Europe, and I was like, "This is not normal. This needs a story." And then like, okay, there's no way that comes without some sense of evil. And so I started reading about like Iberian cultures and about Celto-Iberian cultures, and offshoots of that too, right? So there's a central bit about these guys where the part of the sacrifice is that they also do like these giant barbecues. So they just like take giant trenches of charcoal and then like spit roast like oxen on like crosses next to the like, which is what they do in the Pampas in Argentina. Which is like, it looks like hell on earth. I'm sure the meat is delicious, but it looks insane. And I was like, you can't pass up that kind of visual. You gotta use it. So the idea there is that, you know, they have these like, immense herds of bovines that, you know, eat the land clean, kind of like, you know, the Mongol hordes when they came through Europe. And then, you know, before battle, they'll do like mass slaughter, which is probably a pretty good psychological tool against enemies. So, and then burn and roast the meat and then eat it. And then these guys, being kind of religious zealots, then also do kind of religious cleansing before battle, which corresponds mostly to just like vomiting, because they purge themselves. And so they cover them, essentially, like, as I say, they're zealots, so they're not overly taken with the whole cleanliness thing, so they essentially just leave it. And so it looks like they've vomited up tar. And so they have a nickname given to them by their enemies called they're called the tar bellies. Because that was funny. And
yes.
And that's the name of the original Celto-Iberian tribe from the game. They're called the Tarbelli, which was just it became this like I mean, you know me, you know I'm a fan of puns. So yeah, why not have some puns in world building? I don't know. You gotta have fun somehow.
This is just a dad joke.
Oh, like, pretty much.
Totally a dad joke.
Yeah, my little baby's over here meowing at me, so it's all good, brother. Yeah.
All right, let's go on. What was next?
All right, so next is we finished the line art. Now it's slapped on like a background and some base color. Big idea this time was to try and use an undercoat of painting, essentially mimic like an old school painting method where having, for example, a warm undercoat of painting means that'll kind of shine through a little bit as you proceed to add color above it. And so you will get a better cohesive palette, essentially, for the painting. So that was one thing to kind of focus on here. I'm also cleaning up the line art. I have been trying to get better at figuring out a level at which to kind of leave things when it comes to line art. I mean, left to my own devices, I could spend days, right? So I have to try and like, get better at being effective and efficient. So that key word of like trying to get away from clean lines and going towards clear lines, meaning that whatever the read of the drawing is what's important, not the particular like niceness. Oh, this is worth pausing for actually. Not the particular niceness of a brushstroke or a line. And so we came to the point where I was realizing the kind of studies that I had to do. We already did the studies of the bulls in kind of their natural format, and this is more of a inside out kind of thing. Because there was in drawing the drawing, I realized, okay, we're gonna have to see the inside of the skin. And that was an excellent little chance to get some like nastiness into this guy. So I really wanted to try and figure out like an effective way of painting this kind of greasy, wet subdermal layer. And so it's not easy. It's a pretty difficult thing to paint. But figured out something that was at least like a useful simulacrum. So going on in the study, you can kind of see it's a bit of a process kind of building this layer by layer, and it's pretty nasty. There was plenty of people on the Twitch stream who were just like, I'm sorry, I'll be on the stream, but I'm just gonna not look for the next couple of hours when you're painting this. And I mean, I feel like I maybe have had a little bit of a breakdown when we were doing this, because I was starting to laugh pretty maniacally at some point when we were just talking about like, yeah, think about like wearing this. It must be awful. But
yeah,
then again,
I mean,
they're bad guys.
Yeah, okay, they're the bad guys, and they're disgusting, and that's kind of the point of the bad guys, right? To be off-putting.
Yeah, but, without being comically so.
No, but also like vomiting and just being like, eh. I mean, I have this beard in my face, and when I'm eating spaghetti, it pretty much looks that way. But I can't stand it for a minute. I would clean up my face before I take another bite of anything. And these guys just being like, blah, all right, let's go to war.
Think of it more like this, right? Like this is right before a battle, right? And the enemy is lined up, and then they do like a mass slaughter of these animals. And these guys only make up like the extreme religious warrior elite. Think like your Templar Knights or your Shamshir or whatever. Or you're like the followers of the flame in the old Sassanid Empire, and so these guys will then they have they kill their oxen and they're putting on the thing because battle, and then because religion is what it is, right? After the battle, if they've survived, they presumably clean up a little bit before the next feast or whatever. Maybe they even discard the cow skin for a fresh one. Who knows? I haven't really gotten that far, though. I do like that idea that they would just like, okay, well that's enough for that, and then they throw it off and then they go wash. But imagine at this point that they're in essentially like a religious in a kind of cultish trance, right? They're at the stage now where your normal berserker has been munching on mushrooms and going a little fucking nuts. So now they're like, and then they charge into battle.
But all on their jewelry and everything, that's kind of missing the point of jewelry, right? Like,
oh yeah, so everything you can kind of see on him now. Well, now the blood's coming in. But everything you can see on him that's under the skin, that's indicative of the kind of clothing that culture wears outside of the religious perspective. And so these guys were something before they became this religious elite, because this religion is supposed to be quite young. At this point, by the way, I was studying for his beard. I wanted to be a little more scraggly, and who has a better scraggly beard than Rasputin? But so the idea of the religion is that it's relatively young and it's extremely kind of what do you say, like extremist, I guess. And so each one of these guys is trying to out crazy the next one. They're showing their devotion to this new god or this old god or whatever whatever the relationship to it is, by essentially like going through the trance more and more extreme every time. And so you'll also see like a progression in that. And then maybe I also been toying with the idea of then having like a schism within this schism where you have like the people who keep their skins and the ones who like throw it away, and like they start calling each other like, you know, different names and yada yada. There's all kinds of fun stuff to be done with the religious movements. So you just have to kind of read up and then take the chance.
So you actually have like hardcore people in this group that really wear this thing until it gets all smelly and rotten and all that.
That's what I've been thinking. That would be kind of fun.
Fun, yeah. Yes, obviously. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's people I definitely don't want to fight for many reasons. And I mean, imagine all the flies and maggots and all that.
Oh yeah, but I mean, you know, look at like early sort of priests and especially monk cultures in the Middle East when like Christianity was being supported by the Roman Empire, or at least the Byzantine Empire, right? They got funding to essentially live out in the desert and be crazy ascetics, and they would, you know, live out there until like their clothes literally rotted off their bodies. So it's not a cow skin, but then again, this is fantasy, so you know, I'm allowed to dream, aren't I?
Oh yeah, sure.
All right. So at this point, you're seeing the application of the cowhide study. So I put all the basic colors on, and made a point of making pretty specific selections this time to kind of be able to work within the borders. And so I'm applying what I can in terms of like a flat treatment of what we saw in the study, because I'm trying in my head to peel away the information of light and shadow that I'm going to be adding later. And so at this point, I'm just trying to break down that study to like its flat colors, and then we're going to apply like color and light to give it shape later. And so at this point, it's down to like juxtaposing flat colors, and that's always pretty nitpicky because you can push and you can pull and you can kind of add and subtract and add more and more noise until, you know, the angels come home. But at some point you just have to kind of make a choice and say like, okay, this reads the way I want it to read. So I had a lot of trouble, for example, getting the black vomit to read as black vomit. Mostly because I was trying to find some sort of like visual simulacrum that I could use, and all of it was just like a little too comical. And so I went more understated with it and kind of assumed maybe it had dried or something, you know, like. Ugh. But just imagine having these guys like rock up on you like on the battlefield. You just met with this wall of like putrid stench, and then they come running. Ugh. It's not gonna be nice. But then again, that is the point.
Yeah, I mean, what made you decide that this actually looks like vomit?
Vomit?
Yeah, like what is the indication that this is vomit? Because
I essentially tried a couple of things, and then I applied the engineer's best friend, which is close enough. the fact that it was tarry and black and kind of just discoloring, that was the kind of goal. It wasn't really important that it read like vomit, because most of us haven't vomited black before. And so, I mean, unless you got some real issues, in which case, might want to see a doctor about that. But
I vomited pink once, but that was because of the drink.
Yeah, and also that might ruin the whole. Well, actually, that would probably match the innards here. But anyway, no. So the idea there was essentially just like try and break up the large color shapes, so that the next time I make a member of this culture, I can show him or her in like their actual regalia, and show you how fucked up these guys are comparatively. So that and so at some point I just thought like this reads nicely enough. They look like dirty in a gross way. That's close enough. That's really what I wanted it to read to. And so I was fine with kind of going on because there was larger themes to be done, and we only have so much time, you know. That's actually worth noting. Like, one of your better tools as an artist is like triaging your painting and then being kind of clear with yourself on like what is good enough. How far do I need to push this? And when you read things at like a sufficiently clear level, fucking just cut your losses, move on.
Did it happen to you that you got lost in these details and didn't know where you were when it was enough?
Yep, a lot. I'll point it out when we come to it, but essentially, I got really enamored with the studies of the bull's outsides, not necessarily the insides. And so like I was really interested with how the values there worked, and I really wanted to try and mimic that. And because kind of the glossy black hide delves into the darkest darks, like pretty core black, pretty like succinctly. It's hard to manage that value and not like lose all definition. And we had a couple of the people on the Discord who were doing the assignment with me, who were really struggling with that. And so I think we all kind of gave each other some good pointers on like, why is this not reading the way I want it to read? And I definitely sometimes I tend to like kind of rely on my process a little too much and not engage too much in like critical planning. And sometimes that's fine, because most materials I deal with, I kind of know, I can kind of visualize them, but I hadn't really done cowhide before. And so that was surprisingly difficult to like get that amount of small shapes and details to kind of read correctly.
Before we got to this point, there was the process of adding the values. It's a technicality, but I would love you to explain like what were you doing there.
Oh yeah. So we can go back to about here. It's a little further. Yeah, this is about where it starts. So at this point, we have all our flat colors. Everything is reading as if it has spatial dimensions, but we need to add like light and shadow. And so using a multiply layer, which is what I usually start with, I'm trying to be very direct here. You can see I'm already like throwing in with like little details and stuff, which at some point I'm gonna arrest myself and be like, no, can't do that. We gotta go back. We gotta do this. Yeah, about at this point, I'm starting to be like, no, okay, we gotta actually like figure out the big things first, and then kind of go into the little stuff. The problem when working like I do, especially with this one, was you go through that cycle of dealing with large problem to small problem, large problem to small problem, so many times that when you come to something like light and shadow, where you really need to have an eye for the large problems versus the small problems, you're so aware of all the little details that you just want to get to them. And so it takes discipline that I sometimes don't have to kind of stick with that large to small. But so using a multiply layer here, I'm literally just trying to carve out a form, right? I have a light angle in mind, and so all I'm doing is looking at like an area and saying like, here goes light, here goes dark, here goes light, here goes dark, and just trying to not get it pretty, but just get it right. Prettiness comes later, that'll be part of the rendering and everything, but at this point, all I really want to do is to make sure that I can carve out a shape that reads like a person standing in a bull hide in space. So it's a weird sort of set of mindsets that you have to go through in this, because that's not the same mindset as when I'm doing the colors. When I'm doing the colors, then it's, I got to match up colors. I got to make sure like I'm balancing these like yellows against something that at least reads like green. Like the green trimming on his dress there started out as like just desaturated yellow, and then I really liked like the compositional contrast between like that green and the red, and so I imported a little bit of green on there. So that mindset is very different from the mindset of like, now I'm going to carve out a shape. And so coming into that, I need to get better, I think, at like giving myself time to kind of reset. This technique you're seeing right here, where I'm kind of removing the color information and just like adding a white layer, is really useful because I don't have to think about whether or not the colors are working. I can kind of distance my brain from that and go like, okay, we're just dealing with marble now, or just white material. Yeah. Sometimes I use different layer types, like hard light or soft light, even overlay. And then at this point, I'm using an add layer, which is a linear dodge layer in Photoshop, and starting to add like general lighting. So I'm again not trying to like make things super pretty. I'm not like trying to fix and find like nice graphical shapes. What I'm doing is trying to pop out shapes that I need and recede other shapes that I don't.
most people that follow your work, or when we are in a stream or when in the Discord, when they talk about your art, what stands out the most is the questions about line art. Like, at which point for you is line art ready to go? When don't you need it anymore? And how do you decide that to get rid of it at all? Because in some cases, people aren't sure. I mean, even I am not always sure if the line art is still part of what we are seeing right now, because the values are so interchanged. You know, like it's like you don't really see if it's lines right now or if it's really just added shadows and all that stuff. When is your point where you're like, all right, that's enough, I don't need the line art anymore, just paint over it, right?
Yeah, I mean that's painting over it or blurring it out or just erasing it that's kind of the move of last resorts a lot of time. What I look for is, so the whole point here is to make a visual illusion of something that doesn't actually exist, and so looking at something, you can kind of just listen to your brain and go like, I'm looking at this, does my brain think that it is the thing that I want my brain to think that it is? And do the lines help in that illusion, right? So if I'm looking at something and the line art is standing out as a barrier to me believing something, then that fucking line art has to go. But if it's there and it's not obtrusive and it just looks nice, then I'll just leave it. Because either that or I'll just color it so that like it'll be a darker or a slightly darker version, a shade of the color underneath or juxtaposed. But so I don't really have like one set rule on that. It's more like to be a little blasé. It is whatever looks good, or whatever fits the illusion, I guess. And I think like the fact that I rely on line art is very much down to the fact that I come out of drawing more than I come out of painting. So I can't really design in painting. I have this ongoing argument with a bunch of people. I don't really paint. I color drawings. Though they come out like they come out serving all the purposes of a painting. I could never do it. Or, I can't do it now. Maybe I can if I practice it. But start out with paint. And so it's a kind of a balancing act of etymology, I suppose. But in terms of line art, it's up to, you keep it up to the point where it no longer serves its purpose, and then just shoot, go away.
Is there interest from your side to at some point just pick up oils and start painting without underdrawings and all that stuff?
I mean, maybe. I feel like there's a lot of learning that would have to go into like learning oils, especially if you're talking like wet on wet or something like that.
Yeah.
But we did do at least one character on the Patreon streams with no line art, and that was pretty fun. The big sailor guy.
The old hero.
Arnmegin, the Black Plowman.
Yeah.
Who's also a big favorite of mine. Which was really fun. And it really helped push the process a little. It made me kind of rethink a lot of things, and it did change up how I do a lot of my approaches. So it's really useful to kind of do that. I don't know if I would ever start doing like commissioned work or professional work by manual means. I do more and more ink drawing, which at least is getting me kind of that way, because surprisingly enough, ink drawing is less... How to explain this? So the way that I'm trying to learn how to draw with ink drawing is taking into account a lot of the things that go into painting more than goes into like usual line drawing, which is I'm trying to do a lot of the construction in my head and not on paper, and so I have to kind of take into account, again, like it's about clarity, not about clean lines. So like my lines are not getting particularly clean, but the drawing is getting very clear. It's very easy to see what things are, even if the lines get a little messy. And I'm getting more and more confident with doing that. And I think once you have the confidence to kind of spend more time on like the prettiness of things, then you can try getting like nice, beautiful lines. But based on that as an experience, maybe I would consider doing more sort of traditionally painted things. It is pretty fun to do. I will admit that.
So where do we arrive here? You started backgrounding.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So in terms of production terminology, once we started like screwing around with the background, we are in presentation mode and no longer in concepting mode. So all the work is essentially done, and now we're just trying to make it look appealing. So I knew for the background that I wanted to do something to do with that the Argentinian barbecue idea. I figured though that too many similar silhouettes crammed into the same space would just confuse the matter, and so a big fiery pit seemed applicable, especially if it's before or after the feast. You know, I'm assuming it's after the feast, since he's been, you know, he's done his cleansing and now he's going to battle. So, but the pit would still be there, you know, as a gruesome kind of or an intimidating kind of show of force against their enemies. So I'm imagining like the army is standing off to the side or like behind the smoke screen or whatever. And so the background kind of grew out of, first I just, the last couple of characters we've been doing on the stream, I've just kind of left backgrounds pretty blank because we've been focusing on larger groups of characters, and so we didn't really have time to do like a fancy background. For the next one we're definitely doing more of a scene, so that's going to be more of like an illustration thing. But for this guy, I then wanted to like compose that background to suit the read of the character. In the beginning, it seems a little too heroic almost. It's light coming in from the side, and it's matching the kind of the lights falling on him. So he feels almost then like, you know, like a hero facing into the sun. And so very soon I start occluding that and taking away like the heroism aspect. But as it stands now, this is kind of what I threw up to be kind of a stand-in, so that we had the values read correctly. So I'm going in now to do I think a second value pass on the guy to start making things more interesting, more juicy, as we ended up calling it on the stream. There's a lot of internal etymology that pops out of like a social stream like that. So unfortunately, one of the main adjectives that we started applying to things was keeping it moist, which is just unfortunate.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's an unfortunate word. It's an unfortunate term, but hey, it works.
Yeah.
So
there's this thing that people don't like to hear the word moist.
Moist? Why? What's wrong with moist? It's pretty.
I think that started from How I Met Your Mother or something from that show. There was this one episode. Whatever.
No doubt.
Yeah.
But so yeah. So at this point, I mean, most of the materials are reading more or less the way I want it, and so it's down to like getting the values just right. And so you'll see, moving back and forth here, I'm trying to kind of apply the things that we learned in the studies. I'm trying to simplify things and also like add appropriate detail, like, you know, a little bit of blood on the what did you call it? The raven's beak?
Rabenschnabel.
Rabenschnabel. Oh, I am so figuring out a way of using that. But okay.
Rabenschnabel.
Yeah, Rabenschnabel. But so, as you can see with like most of the character, things are more or less at their final read. So having added the background, I'm now going back in and trying to like match everything up so that he feels like a guy standing in this place. And that's going to be more or less the push and pull for the rest of the video. I mean, it's small, but it's significant for me that it takes this long now to get to the pushing and the pulling, because usually I engage with that way earlier in the process, and so have to end up like really trying to be nifty, and so holding back from that for longer actually saves me time and energy, because layering information correctly means that if you end up with something that has clarity at the end, much like with a drawing, there's less stuff to clean up, there's less stuff to kind of polish when there is sufficient information there. So all I really have to focus on at this point in the painting is like making it nice, making it juicy, and so that became kind of the ethos there. So you can see like I'm starting to work into the shadows and trying to use the darkest dark to make like visual guidelines through the character, and yeah. Yeah.
How did you figure out how long the legs of the cow, of the ox, would hang down? I was just. This is kind of like. I'm a bit worried about you. How did you know how it would look when someone would wear a skin like this?
I think I messed that up, actually. I don't think
really?
that's an accurate length. I kind of eyeballed the anatomy based on the size of the head, and then tried to kind of figure out what length would be lost in terms of like folding and everything. And so it was a kind of sorta. I didn't really. It feels to me like it's a little short, but on the other hand, that adds to the creepiness. So I'm kind of okay with that. But yeah, no, definitely like basic eyeballing on that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
but it's looks pretty accurate to me.
So as I said before, it's the engineer's best friend. Close enough.
Yeah. Yeah, in the beginning, I was thinking that it's probably standing in front of a volcano, and then I realized, okay, probably not without shoes, because that is probably pretty hot. But of course, this barbecue aspect makes absolute sense. So this just a kind of an odd question. Why is it black vomit? Is it because they're drinking blood, or is it like charred meat that they eat and then they kind of have to?
Why not all of the above, right? Well, essentially, I'm again like harkening back to history. And if you remember your Iliad and your Odyssey, then before departing for Troy, Agamemnon and the others butcher a bunch of bulls, and as they say, they wrap the best meat in layers of fat, and then they burn it. So that the fat is burned, but the meat is roasted, and they can eat the meat. And so I just figured that something like that would be appropriate for these guys as well, and that when you eat blood, when it interacts with human digestive systems, goes black. Meat when charred goes pretty black. So the idea being that the unfortunate interaction between heavily calcified meat and blood, and no small amount of probably just charred stuff, would end up being a nice, pretty, blackish stew that comes back up.
I'm just realizing that that's kind of bulimic, right?
Oh yeah, I mean there's definitely aspects of that too, right? Yeah, I didn't really think of it as that, but that's a perfectly good point. That there's this kind of extreme fetishization of purging and self-image, and no small amount of toxicity, most likely.
Yeah, and we just imagine them having this conversation like in Zoolander, where they're like, "Of course, I'm throwing up after food. Like this is totally normal."
Yeah. What? You don't?
You have seen Zoolander, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if it would have been more effective to see, like, if he was throwing up black, if he would have been blonde.
That's a point, but I already have. There's so many blonde people already in time.
Yeah, that's true.
and not for nothing, but I don't know. That's actually that is actually a good point. I mean, I'm not against that idea. There might be variants on this guy, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. Stringy black puke and stringy blonde beard. That'll be nice and disgusting.
I just wonder if he then might look like Hulk Hogan. Because at some point the guy was kind of like dyeing his beard in the middle here. It was like black, and he had still that.
How perfect!
The blonde handlebar thing, like it looked absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah,
what did you do there?
Huh?
You had like a red lines with 1, 2, 3 or something.
So I was trying to. That was from a conversation in the stream where someone was asking about distribution of detail and how to create effective reads. And so it's kind of, I usually either think of it as partitions of 1, 2, 3, 4 down a character, and I choose which one's more important, right? So for this guy, like the top 2, 1 and 2 are the most important ones, so that's where the majority goes, and then I make like a mental mark, like below that I'll engage less with the detail and just make cursory reads. The other thing was to point out like the points of highest contrast were going to be important. and as that stands now, it's like it's by each of the arms and up towards the face. And that's a nice sort of little triangle of reeds as well. If you just look at this guy, your eye kind of wants to stick up there, and then sometimes you can kind of go down and look at like the feet and the other stuff, but your eye tends to migrate up where there's high amounts of contrast and high amounts of detail. And so that is at least somewhat by design. That was what that was about. So yeah, at this point, again, we're polishing and polishing. I really like when we were doing this one. I really wanted to get like the reads that I had envisioned at the beginning to work to kind of a self-explanatory point. And so I'm spending quite a bit of time at this point trying to get like the flesh to feel fleshy. And that is an unfortunate combination of words, but a worthwhile expenditure of time. So I'm going back, I'm looking at that study that we did, and trying to kind of apply some of the things. There's a lot of nitpickery at this point, so it's a little hard to kind of see exactly where the work is being done. But I'm flipping off and on layers. I'm testing out, like, is this thing reading? Is that thing reading? So I'm just going around the image, picking out like little sections and going like, is this clear? Is this clear? Could this be more clear? Should I make this more obtuse? Here we go again with the detailing thing. So it's not easy to kind of say specifically what it is, right? That's gonna mark the final point of a drawing. It's when things kind of feel cohesive all of a sudden.
For your with your experience, right, on this, like what feels right for you. It might be something different for somebody else, of course.
Exactly, which is essentially where we get style. And so at this point, I'm simplifying certain things. I'm kind of detailing others. And I'm trying to see, for example, the flap of skin that's coming down next to his face there. It felt weird to me, so I keep like coming back to like touch up on it and trying to figure out like what's wrong here. Why is this not working? And you'll see like a little bit of pushing and a little bit of pulling. There's also a little bit of work within the layers. At this point, we worked up like 30 layers, which is far more than I usually go for. So at some point, for expediency's sake, I copied everything over to like a separate layer so that I could use smudge tool and kind of start rubbing things out a little. And that starts happening right about now, I think. Maybe in a tiny bit. But it is that process of just continuously going around the image and going like, okay, what do I want to add? What do I want to take away? And trying to not like change your mind too much. Like try and figure out like what is the intended read, and what do I need here for this to work? And then where can I kind of remove stuff to keep the image interesting, and like a little bit of brushwork goes a long way. But it is a source of constant frustration for me that I can't seem to get myself to remember to not nitpick. Like at the end here, I'm running around with like a tiny brush and just like and
it looks like it, but it's mesmerizing.
Oh yeah, I mean it is fine, but it's like I notice to myself that like when I look at the final piece, like in 6 months I look at this and I'll be like, I didn't need half of this shit. I have the same problem with like pieces we did 6 months ago. When I look at it, I'm like, I like it, but why did I spend that much time on that thing? Like no one's gonna look at that. That's not interesting. It's not important. And so
I don't think no. I don't think that's true.
No, it's like, I'll show you an example. But it's like, like the foot wraps on a guy's like back foot that's in shadow, and I would spend like a bunch of time like making sure that it sits right. And I'm like, it's good for me. I like it, so I'm gonna do it. But I'm also like, okay, I gotta try and figure out ways to make this more cursory, make this more simple, so that the exchange of time and effort isn't wasted on like a thing that I end up looking at going, that's not worth the time, But
isn't there like the saying, like a second spent in fun is not a wasted one?
Oh, that's true. But
so
but
if you
there are
enjoy
things that are more fun than drawing leg wrappings. So so sometimes it's less about fun and more about me just being anal retentive and just going like, must get it all perfect. I'm in render mode now, and I'm trying to kind of up my game a little on that front.
So since this is not really a concept, but more like going already into like editorial illustration, I believe that there's a lot of people who would, especially in a printed book, and I'm speaking from experience, obviously, who would really appreciate this piece and look at it like Where's Waldo picture, you know, like seeing like, okay, he thought of this. Oh, Jesus, he thought of this shit. Yeah, like, so I don't think that it's a waste of time, because sometimes these are the pieces that make them stand out compared to other artists. Because, I mean, if you want detail, you get something like this, right? If you don't want it, you get something maybe from another artist or from like or by your sketchbook or something. So
that's a fair point. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. No. You should keep drawing legs in shadows, and I'll do all that stuff. Definitely.
All right. That's next week's study. Legs and shadows.
Legs and shadows. Yeah.
But so at this point, we're definitely in the final sort of rendering layer. So you can see that I've been going around the edges, kind of making things a little more gruesome. So where before, for example, the edges of that skin was really like nice and straight, I'm now trying to like hack it up a little bit. So the idea is that they don't do a particularly nice job here. They go in with like to just get it open, and so everything's kind of ragged and screwed up. Because I was towards the end here, I was feeling like there was not enough time spent on like the silhouette and base read elements. So I'll go around the edges and like soften some things up and use a bit of a textured brush to kind of soften the edges and make them look a little furrier. Especially see it like in the neck of the bull. And just trying to, you know, smooth out shadows and make things read cohesively. So you can see like there's some areas of shadow, for example, that's going to be coming in pretty soon. And then very much towards the end, I'll probably pause as we can see, but I go in with a adjustment layer and use curves to kind of push the values just where I want them, just so they sing, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah,
they get real nice and moist.
Moist.
Oh yeah, moist.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we're like 50 seconds out. So I think this is where you can see the values coming in. So we're just tweaking things so they just get just right. And this is where like all my worries are gone. Like I'm enjoying it fully at this point, and it's just like it's just about like adding the nice little touches and making sure everything's just where I want it. It's the happiest time of the painting, because at this point, for better or for worse, I am more or less done. I'm just like dotting T's and crossing I's. I mean, that's the other way around, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Making it as nice can be.
Well, this is a great poster, for example, for those who would actually stomach to put it up. But I mean, the dramatic light in the background and everything, that's
oh,
that
yeah.
alone. If it wasn't about this, but this looks
like,
great.
Put it on your wall and give up Carpaccio.
Yeah, I mean, you could even put Voldemort in front of a scenery like this. You know, it's
it's true. It's true.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so let's dive a bit deeper into the details of the finished piece, and maybe we can wrap up the like bullet points of where to go with this, what people can take away from it. So when I'm looking at this, I just realized for the first time that there is a spike in the head of the bull, which is probably a practical use. Am I right? Right.
So yeah, the idea essentially came out of like he's got to be wearing something under his head. Yeah, so essentially he's wearing a helmet with a spike, so that like you could essentially before they go into battle, they just like that thing down on, and that's how it's held in place. That and like he has some straps under his chin, you can see, so they kind of sewn it in there.
Oh yeah,
this is I warned you.
Oh fuck!
But you can see here, for example, like around the eye of the bull here, and around the ear, you can see where the line art is still there. If I zoom out, it just looks like detail. So that's where I'll keep it, right? But then in other places, I'll have removed it completely because it would interfere with the read. Along the edges here, you get some of these nice kind of brushstrokey moves where I was trying to soften up the silhouette a little bit. And because I don't really want you to be focusing on that shoulder, so I'm softening it and making it like a highway to get up to the face, because this is where the money is. Oh yeah, look at his eyes, look at this handsome boy. What have you done to my boy? And so moving down, you see kind of the stained and ruined cloth, and those nice sort of shredded bits of flesh around him.
Who's cleaning up that shit? I mean, they're probably married, right? So they're probably married and just give it to their wives and they're like, clean that up.
Come on.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And then he's got a little sexy tassels on his skirt and some dirty feet. He probably has his wife wash those too. But so the thing to not take away from this is that this is like a perfect process or anything of the sort. There's still a ton of learning to do here, and in terms of efficacy, there's still quite a bit of a ways to go. However, the beauty of this process was like the ease of which you can take an idea, a concept, and build it in each layer of information, right? So both with in the line art, we could build a design, and in the flat colors, we're able to just focus on that and like really figure out those color layerings. And then in the light, we get the drama, and we get the kind of ability to focus in on where we want light and shadow. That's interesting. And then in the end, sort of during rendering, when you have these layers of information, even though when you zoom in on this guy, a lot of stuff is still quite rough, the overall read is quite clear. And so much as we talked about with the drawing before, it's not so much about clean, more about clarity.
To wrap it up for the viewers of this masterclass, I wonder if you can point towards like a handful do's and don'ts in regards of this, specifically when it's about character design and maybe creation of culture and world building. I think when most people sign up for your Patreon or try to learn from your talks, I mean, you basically wrapped it up last time when we talked about believability. The best lies are those that are close to the truth. Is something that someone told to me once.
Yep.
You take yours away from like your lies. You take them away from history and keep them close and get inspired from this.
Yeah.
Just there are a few pointers that I would like you to make considering art, but also when it's about history, because whoever likes world building probably has to read history to know how things usually turn out, because this is where you can learn much from them. What should people read to become good world builders, and what should they remember when they're drawing to make these things believable?
I would say like the thing to keep in mind when you're reading history is that a lot of historians and a lot of historical popularists enjoy a simple narrative, right? Like you read a book about Alexander the Great, and it's either like, he's the worst guy ever, or he's the greatest guy ever. And that's as per usual. People are just freaking people, right? He wasn't a god, he was just a guy. And if you go on, if you go on and read past the point of his death, which is usually where people kind of put down the book, there's more drama to follow. And we all we think about in history with, we talk about different eras and different movements and different things. History is the entirety of the story. And so to get a good sense of any point in history, it's a good idea to try to have an overarching idea of all of it. And I'm not saying like you need to know every goddamn year in history to have a say, but like knowing about the basic movements of history from the Indus Valley civilization up through sort of the birthing of Mesopotamia and the migration of people sort of into the Indo-European areas, and like having a general idea of what's at stake when wars are fought, or when kings die, or when new religious movements come around. These things are kind of key, because when people, like, I know a lot of people who are into medieval history, for example, and a lot of them are into medieval history because they like swords. And I'm like, I like swords. I dig me some swords, but there are other weapons too. And so, kind of if you want to get into history, get into history. Like it's amazing. But be patient and tolerate bad podcasts, because there's a lot of bad podcasts with a lot of good information. So get friendly with them. And I would say, like, read stuff that you didn't expect to like, right? Like, one of my least favorite periods of history for a long time was like the post-Republican era of Roman history. It was the pits, because up until that point Rome was kind of the coolest, and then after that point it's, if you believe in Gibbons, a slow decline and fall. And it kind of it's heartbreaking to read that when you're really into Rome as an idea. But you should read it. You should understand what the entirety of Roman history is, and the fact that there is such amazing drama in the Byzantine period, and in the transfer between the Byzantine Sassanid period and the later Islamic Caliphate period, which is, like, I know all of that stuff has connotations and buzzwords that don't necessarily mesh well with people, but it's worth reading. I just finished a book called In the Shadow of the Sword, which is the chronicling of that last mentioned period. And it's amazing. It's such incredible drama. So it's worth reading.
How to implement this in your art?
So in understanding history, you understand where cliches come from. And I'm not saying you need to necessarily avoid cliches, but cliches come around when people repeat something ad nauseum, meaning they repeat a thing without understanding the things that made that thing happen. So, for example, in fantasy, we hear a lot of this, right? A chosen person is pushed out of their home for various reasons, has to go on a quest to figure out a thing about themselves that can help them save the world, right? It's Jesus. It's the Jesus story. That's what we've been told a million times, because that's what Tolkien tells us, and that's what Rowling told us. And there are other stories, right? It doesn't have to be that. There are so many interesting, fascinating stories from history that you can kind of levy drama from. Wes Anderson said it really well in The Grand Budapest Hotel, that people think, a writer's mind is an everlasting source of ideas, but it is not so. The art of being a writer, the art of being a world creator, is to keeping your goddamn eyes open and seeing how the real world was made. If you can understand that,
you gotta live to write. Yeah, I
exactly.
That.
And it's the thing with history as well. If you can understand the complexity, or at least some aspect of the complexity of history, you can use it. So I would say, for example, if you're going to write a story about a civil war, right? Don't go for something as trite as the American one, because it's pretty silly. Go for something complex, like the War of the Diadochi, because that shit's fucking fascinating, and the political idea of where kingship comes from. Like, I'm not gonna get into it, but for example, the idea of holy kingship, like we think of it in European terms, is so not where it comes from, and it's fascinating to see how you can go about creating a world that's easily understood by many people by using a framework that people are not familiar with. People will buy most things if you contextualize it correctly. So it's the understanding that the difference between the unbelievable and the believable is not like some abstract measure. It is the ability to contextualize things for people to get into it, right? I personally am a huge enemy of gatekeepers, and so it's applicable and understandable for everybody. You just gotta give it some time and work on it. And like you could do. I wouldn't say read Decline and Fall by Edward Gibbon, because that is a long and tried book. But you could listen to podcasts like The History of Rome, for example, which are fantastic.
These are you just said so many sentences that actually should be added to T-shirts, and we should tap into this. I think we came to a good point to just thank you and thank everybody who was listening, and to thank the CG Cup platform for making this thing happen in the first place.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. This was amazing.
It was really fun.
And I hope there will be many more occasions like this one. Have a good one, everybody, and see you next time.